of it. Um, as you will see, we're recording this session. Thanks, Madeline. So that it will be available for you after the fact and or for any of your peers or other folks who missed this call. We found a good amount of interest by folks wanting to go back to these resources, either because we're covering so much that people want to be able to go back and double check what they heard or take notes later, as well as share with others. So we will post this recording to our website, hopefully in the next couple days. We always try to do it in a couple days, but look for it to be posted there shortly. We'll drop that link in the chat. Our focus today is once again on the Green Resilient Retrofit Program at HUD. This is a very exciting opportunity we've touched on in previous sessions. The deadline is very rapidly approaching for the first application window, so we are very lucky to have Tom Davis here from HUD to talk about it, and then we're also going to hear from Todd Nedwick to talk about the bonus tax credit. Next slide, please. We also want to make sure that you have a sense of what's coming up. And so we'll, at the end of the session today, we'll cover some of those upcoming sessions. Next slide, please. So a couple news items that we'll get to early in the agenda. I hope that by now you all have received our Bootcamp newsletter, which we sent out last week. We hope that it serves as a useful kind of reference guide for you all, both for what we covered, to remind you of what resources we have posted online, and also to share any new news that's coming out. As you know, this is a very busy time with implementation of the Inflation Reduction Act. There's new program guidance dropping at any given moment. There are new requests for input dropping at any given moment. We are trying to keep tabs on all of that and make sure that you know about it. So this newsletter will be a resource for you to keep tabs on all of those things. It is going both to you all, the HFAs, as well as to the owner and developer Bootcamp participants. You may recall that we are doing a parallel program focused on owners and developers. So we'll be sharing this information with them as well. If you're not getting it, please let us know. And if you'd like other members of your staff from your agency to be added to the list, please let us know. Madeline is your great first point of contact there. Related to the owner and developer bootcamp, last week we also shared a list of the participants in the owner and developer bootcamp so that you could see who from your state was participating. That was one of the requests that we saw in the survey feedback that we'll go through in just a minute. If you would like to, if you've not received that, if you misplaced it, if you'd like to get it again, please reach out to Madeline, but hopefully you find that helpful. And then the last thing I want to cover briefly before we turn to some of the survey results is that we're about to launch a new element of this program, which is sort of a cohort learning opportunity. And the thought is that even though we very much want for all of you to feel free to come off mute and come on camera and be able to ask questions and talk with one another in the course of our agenda, and you'll see moments where that's welcome, we also recognize that this is a lot of information, and we saw from the survey that I'll share in just a second that you all value learning from one another. So we're going to be creating these sort of voluntary cohort learning opportunities that will occur in between our regularly programmed sessions. And the idea really is that that's a place for sort of peer sharing, for you to ask questions of one another, for you to share what's working within your own state. On the next slide, we're going to sort of prompt you for a couple of questions to better understand how we can make these as effective as possible. We would like to know, first of all, we've already got you locked in for one session a month, sometimes two, but is this something that you'd be interested in, this cohort learning session? Go ahead and fill out the poll now. We really do value getting this kind of feedback from you as we shape these cohort learning opportunities. Go ahead and answer that. And then secondarily, like, what are the things that you think would be most helpful or that you'd be interested in talking about during these cohort learning sessions? We identified a few. How to engage residents in the design, implementation, sustainability, resilience measures, how to structure resources to incentivize developers and owners while simultaneously benefiting the HFA. You all have done some version of this before with prior programs. How did you make that work well? We've talked once before, and we'll talk again about how important it will be to structure relationships with your state energy office, or maybe there are other topics that you're kind of mulling over and like a chance to talk more about. So feel free, if you don't mind, please answer this poll. We'll shut it down in about 5, 6, 7 seconds, and we'll share those results with everyone. But this will help us sort of craft that first learning cohort opportunity. We will ask that if you are interested, you please actively, proactively RSVP to Madeline, let us know about your interest, then we will make an effort to schedule the time that will be most amenable to everyone who responded. So we don't want to put more meetings on your calendar than you need, but if this is something you'd be interested in participating in, please let Madeline know. And meanwhile, let's go to the results and see what the poll answers say. Okay, great. So a solid, I'd say share of you said yes, maybe, probably depends on the topic and the date, I would imagine. Lots of interest here in how to structure resources to incentivize developers and owners while also benefiting HFA, and second interest in state energy office. If you're interested in something else that we didn't mention, drop it in the chat, or feel free to come on camera and off mute for a moment to share that, if you don't mind. We'll pause for just a second for any additional thoughts that people might have on that front. Okay, well, if not, I would say just for ease and convenience, if you would like to drop your name in with a yes next to it into the chat, that will be one way that Madeline knows you're interested. That will save you from an email. Otherwise, you can email Madeline directly, and then we'll set about to find a time that works for all. If you're maybe, also please, raise your hand, your virtual hand, if you will, by putting your name in the chat. Okay, next slide, please. A couple weeks ago from our last session, we inquired with you about some additional feedback that we were looking for to help us guide and craft the remainder of our sessions together, which there are several. And it was extremely helpful feedback. We thought you all might be interested in seeing what you said and who else is on these calls, who else is in this cohort. So we asked the question, how sort of familiar are you with integrating the following measures into affordable housing? We asked about green building certifications, energy efficiency, electrification and decarbonization, renewable energy, and resilient retrofits, as well as water efficiency. Very few of you consider yourself experts in most of these things. The largest share was around energy efficiency, which is fantastic and very much welcome. Some of you felt moderately familiar with, a lot of these interventions. Limited amount of understanding so far in electrification, decarbonization, resilient retrofits. All of this is extremely helpful information to us. I hope that you find it reassuring, and that if you are among the limited knowledge folks, that you're among peers. Similarly, that we've got some real experts in the group to tap into and to learn from. So again, we'll be covering all of these topics over the course of the next few sessions. So helpful to have this baseline, if you will. Next slide, please. We also wanted to get a better sense of how you all are approaching your work now, and how do you see the value of this work. So we asked, for example, to what degree do you value making sustainable and resilient investments? Is it always a high value? Is it always worth the effort? Is it sometimes worth the effort, sometimes worth the value? The majority of 2/3 of you say that it is of high value and worth the effort. A little bit lighter numbers in terms of how do you value integrating residents to sustainability and resilience measures. I think we all acknowledge that that's important, but it can be challenging. So is it a high value? Is it always worth the effort, or something less than that? And we see the numbers shake out here with the preponderance of folks saying it's of moderate value, sometimes worth the effort. Finally, we want to get a better handle on how you all work together now, or how you would be inclined to work together. So how likely are you to collaborate with state agency counterparts, either within the Housing Finance Agency or other agencies? Very much a collaboration inclined group here, which we're really happy about. 3/4 of you say you're likely to do that. Couple of you unlikely, but hopefully we can change that. Hopefully we can change the orientation and help you all create a bit of a glide path, at least to coordinate with some of what we see as the more critical state agency counterparts, particularly in energy. So again, thank you all for responding to that survey. We will periodically ping you with surveys, and appreciate you completing them. And we promise to always reflect that data back to you. All right, with that, I am really happy that we get to sort of turn to the star attraction here. We have Tom Davis with us from the Office of Recapitalization at HUD. Tom is presiding over the Green Resilient Retrofit Program, which is going to be the focus, once again, of our talk today. So Tom, we had some wonderful staff from your office on our last call to do sort of an overview, but we're really happy to have you here with us today. So let me turn it over to Tom Davis.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's great to be here. So what I'm hoping to do is give you an overview of the Green and Resilient Retrofit Program, and then talk a little bit about sort of how HFAs can plug into this context, and then some questions that you may have that aren't anticipated by the presentation, and we can talk about those. So why don't we go to the next slide? The Green and Resilient Retrofit Program is the only part of the IRA that came to HUD. And the key part is how much money is that? So you'll see conversations that reference the $837.5 million in appropriated funds, and then up to $4 billion in loan authority that the IRA provides for the GRRP. I'll explain in a little more detail later sort of how those two numbers play out. But the key is that 837.5 million, which influences how much money we can actually put out on the street. Lots of things that are covered. The bullets in green on this slide are the things that are referenced in the statute, but they encompass an awful lot of other kinds of work in the details. So if we go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about who is eligible for this money and what kinds of things they can do with the money. And then ultimately I'll talk through how they apply for the money. The GRRP is really focused on specific portfolios of properties that HUD subsidizes with rental assistance. As a sort of historical artifact, when there was discussion of Build Back Better, there were proposals for public housing, there were proposals for the multifamily housing portfolio, and only the GRRP made it into the final Inflation Reduction Act. And so the programs, the portfolios that were in GRRP when GRRP was one of many proposals were the properties that are funded under GRRP when GRRP is the only proposal. So it's unfortunate that many of the other properties that HUD supports are not covered by GRRP, but that's sort of the way the drafting fell out. So the shorthand way to think about eligibility for GRRP is project-based rental assistance, PBRA, Section 8 properties, 202 properties, housing for the elderly, and Section 811 properties. Those are the big categories. There are a few nuances. For example, PBRA properties that were created through conversion under the rental assistance demonstration had to have been executed before September 30th, 2021. There are some very small portfolios like the Section 236 properties receiving interest reduction payments. You know, that's less than 100 properties nationwide. So there are some little nuances that you should check in the eligibility section in the NOFOs. But the broad brush is that these are all properties that are administered through the Office of Multifamily Housing Programs at HUD. And the shorthand version is it's the PBRA portfolio, the 202 housing for the elderly portfolio, and the Section 811 housing for persons with disabilities portfolio encompasses the vast majority of who's eligible. So if we go to the next slide, we can talk a little bit about the kinds of things that the GRRP can pay for. Ranges from things around efficiency, so higher efficiency windows, higher efficiency heating and cooling, all of the things that, insulation, all of the things that we may well have been working on or funding for many years, that certainly is an eligible cost. A new category of things that GRRP can pay for that is less, that has not been funded as much over the last decade, are the climate resilience efforts, like backup power sources, measures to make the building livable through a climate disaster and through the aftermath of a climate disaster. Materials that help weather a hurricane, like storm shutters, or fortified roofs that are fire resistant in wildfire areas, and a variety of storm and stormwater flooding management tools fall into this climate resilience category. And then there's a third category of carbon reduction, which is electrification. So shifting all of the gas hot water heaters to electric hot water heaters and that kind of thing. Generation of clean energy through solar or wind or geothermal or things like that. And also some things that may not be as much on people's radar screen, such as low embodied carbon building materials. So building materials that the extraction of the raw materials is less carbon intensive and that kind of thing. And then GRRP also pays for some of the soft costs and transaction costs associated with this kind of transaction. So relocation, environmental remediation, the a certain amount of owner overhead, because we understand that these projects take a fair amount of work. So that's the general kinds of things that we can pay for under the GRRP. And if we go to the next screen, highlight the ways the money can flow. And this, the statute allows for both grants and loans. And in the loan framework, we are offering primarily loans that are paid out of property surplus cash, so that HUD will get a share of the annual surplus cash documented in the annual financial statements at the end of the year. 50% in most cases, 25% in some cases, and that surplus cash will pay down to HUD over a period of time, and there's some flexibility to extend the term if needed to pay down the remainder of the loan and that kind of thing. This distinction between grants and loans is what determines ultimately how much money we will put out on the street. You recall in the first slide, I mentioned the $837.5 million in appropriated money and up to $4 billion in loan authority. Because with the soft loans, the surplus cash loans, we have to make some assumptions about how much of those loans will be paid back to the federal government in a reasonable amount of time, and the amount that we can expect to be paid back in sort of the coming 15 years, we can take out of the loan authority portion of the GRRP, but the amount that we don't expect to have paid back in the next 15 years, that we have to fund out of the $837.5 million of subsidy. And all of the grant money we have to fund out of the $837.5 million. So what that translates into is that we project and it's a projection. We'll find out based on the nature of the applications that come in and what the owners are asking for. But based on assumptions about how many owners will ask for grants and how many will ask for loans, we think we're going to put out on the street about $2 billion of funding. So when you see in the first slide, the 837.5 and then the 4 billion. And then if you go to the NOFOs and you add up what we reference in the NOFOs, you'll see that that ends up being about $2 billion. That's that difference, that we don't exactly know how much money we're going to put out on the street because we don't know how many owners will ask for grants or how many will ask for the surplus cash loans. But we generally expect that most of our nonprofit applicants will be asking for grants, and that most of our for-profit and low-income housing tax credit applicants will probably be asking for loans because of the potential income tax event that a grant would trigger. Tom,
can I interrupt for a moment?
Sure.
So
yeah.
We have a couple questions in the chat, and I'm wondering if you want to take them at the end or if you want me to sort of interrupt as we go.
Sure. Certainly feel free to interrupt. And I did notice two of them that, and maybe there are more that flew by that I didn't notice. One was related to eligibility and new construction.
Yes.
The NOFO references new construction PBRA, which could be a little confusing because that is the name of a portion of the PBRA portfolio that were new construction back in 1970. So the vast majority of these properties are rehab kinds of properties. There are a few cases where new construction might be in the mix. For example, if someone is taking a PBRA property and moving it from one site, moving the rental assistance from one site to another site under, for example, the 8BB authority or a transfer of assistance authority, that new construction as a result of moving the existing PBRA contract would be an eligible use, because when the application comes in, that property is a PBRA property. So there are a few situations where there is new construction could be happening, but the vast majority of these are going to be rehab and retrofit kinds of scenarios. And then the question about whether it happens in the context of a recapitalization or not, I'm going to answer that a little bit later when we are talking about the three different ways, the three different NOFOs that are part of the GRRP design.
Great. And we'll also get to how it layers in a bit as well, I think.
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
Perfect. Thank you, Tom.
Sure. So if we go to the next slide, I've previewed this a little bit in that there are three different NOFOs. There are three paths that we have designed that are really designed to meet properties and meet owners where they are in their planning and thinking about a property. The three NOFOs, we're referring to them as the Elements Award, the Leading Edge Awards, and the Comprehensive Awards. And I am going to do a little bit of side-by-side comparison of the three. And then there's a lot more material on the website for specific property owners to be thinking to help specific property owners decide which one makes sense for them. But for HFAs, the broad brush is probably the most useful, in that Elements Awards are really designed, they're smaller amounts of money that are designed to sort of layer on to a recapitalization transaction that is well in the pre-development stages, nearing closing of the financing, and really the Elements is sort of a gap filler to do more stuff. The Leading Edge Awards are also designed for properties where the owner is planning a major recapitalization, but the leading edge awards are more designed as first money in kind of funds, where the commitment is there so that the owner is designing the entire recapitalization transaction to meet a really ambitious green certification. And I'll go into it in a little more detail in the subsequent slides. And then the third NOFO, for the comprehensive awards, is the one that is designed where an owner may or may not be doing a recapitalization, a refinance, a tax credit deal. Certainly those are welcome companions to a comprehensive award, but they are not necessary companions to a comprehensive award. The comprehensive award is really the one that is designed to be the most standalone of the three. So if we go to the next slide, I'll dig in a little more to the side-by-side among the three, and then I'll give some examples of a little more detail around each of the three. So the Elements Award, this is the smallest one. It has a $40,000 per unit cap, but probably most applicants will be limited by a per project cap of $750,000. And this is really designed to allow a property that is doing a refinance or a tax credit deal or a recapitalization of some sort to add some green components, or to substitute some building components with a greener alternative, or to perhaps even avoid the value engineering out of some green alternatives. So this might be a tax credit deal where they want to add solar, or it might be a tax credit deal that was planning on a kind of ordinary hot water heater, and the Elements Award allows them to substitute a really high efficiency electric hot water heater for the kind of ordinary hot water heater that they were planning beforehand. Or it might be funding to avoid value engineering out that higher efficiency hot water heater. So we're expecting to put about $150 million, $140 million out under the Elements Awards, serving about 200 properties. But because the per project size is more modest, this is really only about 7% of the funding of the overall GRRP. The Leading Edge Awards are the ones that an owner is really going to aim for a top tier green certification. They're really thinking in terms of something like net zero, or one of those really aggressive standards, but they're going to combine the GRRP, with a low-income housing tax credit project, or a refi, or some other type of financing. And we expect that in order to really do the design work to hit that net zero standard, or that very green certification that they're aiming for, they need to be earlier in the process of their recapitalization transaction, so that the design work is really comprehensively thought through to hit that standard. The Leading Edge Awards can go up to $60,000 per unit, or a $10 million per project cap. And we're expecting to make about 100 of these awards, and use about 20% of the funding for this category. As you can tell from these dollar figures, that means the bulk of our funding, about 73% of it, or what we anticipate will be around $1.5 billion, is for comprehensive awards. And these are the largest per project dollars, the largest $80,000 per unit, or $20 million per project, and are really ones where HUD will be more involved in the evaluation of the property's needs, and in working with owners on the scope of work. Part of that involvement is to ensure that lesser capacity owners are fully able to participate in the GRRP. And certainly, you know, if it's a high capacity owner, we will be calibrating our involvement appropriately, but really trying to provide the resources so that the full scope of the full range of capacity levels within the ownership portfolio can participate in comprehensive awards, whereas elements awards and leading edge awards are really designed around owners who are pursuing a recapitalization of some sort on their own. The comprehensive awards are really designed around being the foundation of the owner's efforts. They can certainly bring in a transaction, a tax credit, or a refinance transaction. Higher capacity owners are more than welcome in the comprehensive awards category. The comprehensive awards are really designed to serve the whole spectrum of ownership skills. So if we go to the next slide, I'm going to circle back to the elements awards and just talk a little bit more about the selection and operation of elements. So to apply, the owner needs to be an eligible property, getting rental assistance under one of the eligible programs, and they need to be pretty far along in their recapitalization, whether that's they have their tax credit reservation, they've submitted their FHA firm application, they could be a recent Section 811 or Section 202 capital advance awardee, which is another situation where a new construction project might be on the table. But they need to be pretty deep in their planning process. And the applications are ranked based on a series of commitments and priority categories. So properties that are pursuing certain green certifications or whole building electrification will be higher ranked in getting the funding than properties that are doing Better Buildings Challenge or properties that are doing none of the priority categories. But there are some set-asides to ensure all HUD regions are represented in the awardee pool, and that non-metro and metro areas are participating in the elements awardees. So if we go to the next slide, I've just sort of sketched an example of a property that might be an applicant in this in the elements awards. This is a made-up owner. This is totally fictional, where they've applied for the $750,000 cap, and they want to. They're in an area prone to heat waves and drought, and so they want to put some reflective coating on their roof to keep the building as cool as possible. And that's an add-on to what they were planning to do. They also want to do some rainwater harvest systems to deal with some of their water bills. That's another add-on. And then they had a rooftop solar array in their original design, but construction costs came in higher than they expected, so they thought they'd have to value engineer it out. But with this GRRP award, they would be able to retain that solar array in their scope of work. So this is just sort of painting a picture of a sample property in the elements category. If we go to the next slide, this is circling back to the leading edge cohort. And similarly, the owner needs to be an eligible property. But in this context, they have to be committing to a green certification, and the allowed certification, the recognized certifications for this purpose are listed in the NOFO. But you can sort of think of them as the really high high ambition ones that are headed towards net zero. And they have to have more than 50% of the units at the property assisted under the eligible program. That 50% assistance threshold is not present in the elements awards, so that you could have an elements awardee with a smaller percentage of assisted units at the property. The leading edge cohort, we're really sort of trying to look for the properties that can move the needle the most. And so the selection is based on the property's current energy efficiency profile, and the properties most in need of energy efficiency improvements are the ones that will be at the top of the list for funding under the leading edge. And then similarly, there are HUD regional and metro, non-metro set-asides to ensure that the participants are well spread around the country. On the next slide, I've got a little bit of a snapshot of, again, a fictitious property that might be applying. This is, imagine a 50-unit PBRA property that hasn't been renovated in a while, really heavily uses fossil fuels for their heating sources and heating and cooling and cooking. And it's in a hurricane risk area. And the owner has a vision of a property that is much more heavily electrified, uses renewable energy, and is in better prepared for the hurricane risks that hit that part of the country. So this is a situation where they may be deciding to pursue a FIAS 0 Revive certification, and they've got an architect that has said, yeah, looks like that this property could achieve that scope of work. It's early in the design process. They haven't done all of the design work to ensure it, but they think it's feasible. And so this would be funding. In this example, it's a smaller property with 50 units, not terribly small, but not a massive property. And so their $60,000 per unit funding cap is the driving cap, and they would be eligible for $3 million to do the electrification, to do in this case perhaps a wind turbines or and high impact windows because of the hurricanes and all of that kind of work at the property. And because they're anticipating a 4% tax credit deal, and they want to take it into basis and don't want to deal with an income event, they take it as a surplus cash loan. So this is just a painting an example of a leading edge fictional applicant. Then we get to the third category on the next slide.
Tom, could I interrupt you for a moment? I'm so sorry. One of the questions that came in a couple minutes ago was about sort of use of LIHTC and to the degree that that would trigger a subsidy layering review. You mentioned LIHTC in this last example. How would that play out? Yeah, so we do have underwriting standards of, the property can't be overly rich and just resulting in windfalls to the owner. But we expect that the underwriting standards that we have articulated in the GRRP notice are going to be pretty well aligned with the underwriting of a LIHTC transaction, and we are very much wanting the two programs to work well together. Obviously, if the property is getting funding from multiple IRA sources, for example, tax credits for solar panels, we can't pay for the same thing twice, but GRRP can definitely pay for part of something that is also paid for in part
by another source. So for example, if the solar panel costs 10,000 and the solar tax credits can cover 2,000 of it, GRRP can cover another 3,000 of it, that is totally fine. So there is some review to make sure that we're not having a $5,000 solar panel that's paid $5,000 from one source and $5,000 from GRRP, because that would be double dipping. But we can certainly contribute with other sources to a feature. So yeah, certainly there is some review of when multiple sources are coming into the property. But we expect that to generally work pretty well with low-income housing tax credits and also with the IRA funding sources for when these multifamily properties are eligible for some of the other funding under the IRA. So the third cohort is the comprehensive cohort, and again, the eligibility is it's got to be an eligible program, and the 50% of the units must be assisted at the property. And our selection process is really looking at two features. One is the energy efficiency of the property, and the other is the climate risk of the property. In all three cohorts, all three NOFOs, we have tried to design it as a very low barrier to entry application process. It is not an application that looks to extensive narratives, and it's not like a QAP 9% tax credit application. Literally in the comprehensive context, all of the scoring is on these two measures of energy efficiency and climate risk. Obviously, there are other parts of the application, like telling us the property address and number of units and basic information. But the scoring is really on these two features. The climate risk is measured by the FEMA's National Risk Index, where you type in the census tract of the property and it provides what that National Risk Index score is. And then the energy efficiency can be measured on one of two ways. One is that Energy Star has the benchmarking platform called Portfolio Manager, and owners can get their utility bills from their utility company and enter that data into Energy Star, and that produces a score that we are using in the comprehensive context. That works for the majority of properties around the country, but there are some properties that where the utility isn't as cooperative, or they'll, for whatever reason, have difficulty getting that utility track record. And for those properties, we've created an alternative path, which is called MBEST. It's a tool that HUD has created for this purpose, and asks a series of questions. The tool asks a series of questions about the building condition, the age of the systems, when the building and the systems were installed, what kind of building features, are they single pane windows, double pane windows, those kinds of things. And the MBEST tool comes up with an approximation of a scoring of the property's energy efficiency. I should remember what MBEST stands for, multi-family building energy scoring tool, something like that. I should remember because my office created the MBEST, and so it's our own acronym, but I apparently have forgotten it off the top of my head. So the MBEST is really designed to provide an alternative path for properties that might not be able to benchmark as easily for purposes of the application. So there's a set aside for properties applying under MBEST, and then which is corresponds to our estimate of what proportion of the portfolio would struggle to benchmark under Portfolio Manager, under Energy Star's Portfolio Manager. And then there are the same HUD regional and non-metro set-asides. I would point out, though, that all GRRP awardees will need to benchmark as an ongoing requirement of having the awards. So while benchmarking with Portfolio Manager isn't necessary for the application process, it will be necessary eventually. So if we go to the next slide, I'll just paint a quick picture of how the comprehensive process works. As I mentioned, it's a little more involved in terms of HUD's support for the property and involvement in the scope of work process. The HUD will pay for a set of assessments on the property. The environmental reports, the capital needs assessments, those are things we're all pretty familiar with. The energy audit, the renewable energy assessment, and a new climate resilience assessment that we have designed as part of the GRRP design. And we're hoping that with some knowledge on the climate resilience assessment usage through the GRRP, it may become a more useful tool on a broader basis. And those 5 assessments, together with the owner's objectives and feedback from the residents, will be part of the foundation for developing the scope of work, which would include some standard property improvements driven by the capital needs assessment, and then a mix of decarbonization, energy efficiency, and resilience enhancements. And that scope of work would be something that the owner and either the owner directly or the owner in collaboration with a HUD contractor called the multifamily assessment contractor would be developing the ultimate scope of work that would be proposed for funding under the GRRP. The scope of work is developed after the property has already been selected, so that no one is needing to do this work on a speculative basis. The property is selected for the GRRP comprehensive award, and then this development of the scope of work would happen. And then the owner can bring other resources to the table if the owner wants to do more than what the GRRP would pay for, and things along those lines. So if we go to the next slide, I think one of the things that it could be a little confusing to folks is sort of how GRP in the comprehensive context determines what will get paid. So we don't want the GRP to be taking the place of normal good asset management activities that an owner would be doing right now. So we don't want to be, we want the owner to be paying for things that have a very quick payback, or things that really should be replaced right now. And we also want the owner to be paying for a share of the baseline replacement. You know, if the hot water heaters all needed to be replaced 1.5 years ago anyway, the owner really needs to be replacing the hot water heaters today. It's a current capital need cost. That would be more of an owner paying for that baseline replacement, and GRRP sharing the cost by paying for the greening upgrade. But then there are other costs like accelerated replacement. If the hot water heater doesn't need to be replaced right now, but it's worth it to put in a high efficiency hot water heater that might be electric for an electrification initiative, and we're replacing it significantly earlier than its expected useful life. Or we're doing something like solar panels on the roof or other high impact things. Those are all the things that GRRP would pay in their entirety. So we expect that there may be some owner contribution, much less if an owner is kind of current in its capital needs replacement. It may even be negligible if the owner is current in their capital needs replacements. And then GRRP would really be paying for all of the cost share and high impact items. And then also the GRRP has funding for design and project management and relocation and environmental mitigation. So in terms of the timing, we expect that the assessments will, take a couple months after the award is made. We're still in the process of procuring the multifamily assessment contractors who will be going out and commissioning all of the third-party reports. So it, certainly a 2 or 3 month assumption. We'll see whether we can tighten that. We'll see whether the availability of the assessors forces stretching that out a little bit, but that's sort of what we're kind of assuming, and then some time for developing the scope of work. So a comprehensive cohort may get to closing in 6 or 12 months, whereas an elements transaction may, if they apply in June and they get awarded in August, they might be closing in September or October, much faster, given that that's a lighter touch process and is really designed on deals that are getting ready to get to closing as it is. So if we go to the next slide, I'm trying to remember what my next slide is. Yes, the example. So here, 100-unit property that is in a high flood risk zone, and they are highly inefficient, and they are in a reasonably high risk area for their state. And so they might score well. The scoring for climate risk is designed to consider both state and national standards, so that a property in a state that is overall relatively low risk for climate hazards is not disadvantaged by averaging out both the state level and the national level scoring. So the owner in this case, in this fictional example, with 100 units up to $80,000 per unit, could get $8 million. They may be doing a lot of standard property things, but also electrification and solar panels and all of the electric panel upgrades and rewiring that allows the electrification to happen. And they may have an owner contribution because of the HVAC system is past its useful life and needs to be replaced. But that $1 million could be coming out of their reserve for replacement account, for example. So it's not necessarily that the owner needs to come up with equity. It's just that there is in this example, a cost that the owner is responsible for finding the source for. So if we go to the next slide.
Tom, may I interrupt again?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I know we just have about 5 minutes left with you. I want to make sure that just to put in your brain a couple questions that the HFA participants here had fielded before that maybe you could speak to. One is how does HUD envision HFA serving as partners to HUD to implement this program? That's one. And then two, how can GRRP be leveraged to support stalled deals moving forward? There's a couple other questions, but I want to make sure that those got put on the table.
Absolutely. And substantively, this is the last slide anyway. So this is the only slide after this one is the website and stuff like that. In terms of the HFAs as partners for HUD in the GRRP, we have not designed the applications for any of these to require HFAs to do things in order for an applicant to apply. So, if an applicant has a tax credit allocation, that may be helpful for their application in the elements context, for example. But we are not sort of saying you only score if you've leveraged this or that from the state HFA. So we are not putting pressure on the HFAs to change your behavior. We hope that that there may be a lot of cases where the properties that you are funding also pursue green and resilient retrofit program funding, so that the work that is done at the site can be that much more impactful. We also hope that there may be situations where a refi or a tax credit deal can cover the owner contribution in the comprehensive context, or can be the companion financing source in the elements of leading age context. So we think that there are ways that that both state funding and GRRP, lots of ways that they will work together and mutually reinforce each other, but we have not designed the program to try to drive different behavior on the part of the HFAs. And I think in terms of stalled deals, the first place I would look is the elements. If the deal is, somewhat advanced in its thinking and construction costs have gone up, the pricing is coming back, and there's now a gap, the GRRP may be able to avoid the value engineering of good green features. And that could help a stalled deal. Certainly leading edge or comprehensive may also help a stalled deal that has bigger gap challenges, but those are more likely to be not restarting a deal that's a few months away from closing, but earlier, starting moving towards a more deep think about what the scope is at the property. This slide shows a whole bunch of dates, and what you're seeing is that we have designed each of the three cohorts to have, it's not a rolling application period, but a series of waves of applications. So take the elements, for example. We are going to be reviewing all the applications that come in by June 29th. We will make awards based on roughly a quarter of the money we have available for elements. And any applications that are not awarded off of the June 29th review will be tossed back into the pool, and those applications, together with anything else that comes in before September 28th, will then be evaluated for another wave of awards. So there are 4 waves of awards for the elements funding and the money we've set aside for the elements funding. Same for the leading edge awards, and for the comprehensive awards. You can see that they're staggered by a month. So we will be pulling applications basically monthly for the next year.
You all have
making
a very
awards
busy,
over
you have
time.
a very busy year ahead of you.
We have a very busy year ahead of us, but it's also indicative of our having tried to design the applications so that they are relatively easy to put together, and also relatively easy to score and make awards. And I think that the timeline for each award, we are expecting to make awards about 2 months after each of these application dates. So the applicant, an applicant who comes in before June 29th on an elements application might get an award sometime in the latter part of August. And for an elements award, we expect that that's could be a pretty quick move to close process. We expect leading edge and comprehensive awards to take longer to get to closing. So the last slide is just the website. We also have weekly office hours. The website is www.hud.gov/GRRP. There are resources to help applicants figure out which cohort might be best for them to understand the application process. The office hours is a good opportunity for questions. And then, of course, the governing documents are the 3 NOFOs and the GRRP notice itself.
Perfect. Tom, to queue down a couple extra minutes, we might have some questions from the
folks. No,
I'm
available till 3:30.
Amazing. Okay, we promise not to keep you that long. I'll
Feel free.
Anybody, if you have questions, raise your hand. Feel free to come on camera, on mic, ask your question directly or drop a question in the chat. While people are getting their minds about them, I'll tee up one more question that we sent or that we fielded before, which is sort of what is needed from HFAs to support developers in their state to put forward the strongest possible application. In your dream world, Tom, what would HFAs be doing with the developers in their states to put forward the best possible shot?
Yeah, I think a key piece is helping getting the word out, particularly to the, there are lots of your owners in your community that may be a little less focused on the newest thing that is happening at HUD. Somebody who, I'm making this up, somebody whose father developed a PBRA property in 1973 and she's now the owner of the property and that's the only property she has. She may not be as focused on the newest thing that is coming out of HUD. And so getting the word out and helping that owner think through the opportunities, particularly under comprehensive, if they've never done a tax credit deal before, the comprehensive is the option, a good option for them. Certainly getting the word out to your owner community and HFAs will know which properties are really, have a lot of opportunity for greening at a site. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna tee up Seema for a question, and in the course of doing that, give you credit and fix something I misstated before, which was, I want to thank you again for allocating your staff office time to come to speak to the boot camp before. It was not the HFA boot camp, it was the owners boot camp, so I misspoke. But that's exactly in the vein. We're all trying to get the word out about this program and make sure that owners have access to this great information.
And then in terms of other resources, certainly to the extent that they fit within your priorities for QAPs and that kind of thing, it makes it easier for, let's take a comprehensive award. If there is an owner contribution piece, it's going to be easier for them if they can access their reserve for replacement or a 4% tax credit or whatever to fund it. There may be soft sources of financing that may be helpful in that context. Certainly there are lots of opportunities for the GRRP and state funding to be used together. But we definitely did not want to design this around an expectation that the HFAs would just sort of fall in line because we're the 800-pound gorilla. We really want this to, we hope that this is a design that you will find works well with what you were doing anyway. And would love the feedback. If you find it's not, please tell us, because we may be able to tweak things.
Just really quickly before we move to Seema, sorry. we got some feedback from both HFAs and owners and developers that they would like to have just like a toolkit of resources for all the different IRA programs, ones that HFAs can share with their network and their state. So that information is coming, just to help with that, like sharing information with everyone. So stay tuned. But Seema?
Thank you so much. Going along the same lines in terms of outreach, I believe HUD has reached out to eligible properties themselves. Is it possible to share that list with HFAs so then we can piggyback and help them, get to an application or provide any kind of support that would make more applications to HUD possible in a timely manner?
Yeah, actually, the list of the PBRA properties and the 202 and 811 properties is publicly available on HUD's website. I am not sure that I know off the top of my head what the address is, but maybe Danielle or Madeline and I can coordinate to circulate that afterwards.
Definitely.
Oh, that would be really great. Thank you so much.
And Tom, is it reasonable to believe that the regional offices, the HUD regional offices, are making direct outreach to owners, but it would be difficult to know who they've contacted? Is that it? Seem I'm trying to channel your question. Is that right, Tom?
Yeah, so we have encouraged all of the account executives in the multifamily regional offices. All of the eligible properties have account executives associated with, all of the eligible properties are associated with a HUD account executive for oversight purposes. And we've trained all of those account executives on GRRP, and we are encouraging them to talk to the owners as they're interacting with them in the normal course of business. Of course, the extent to which they do that and is going to vary a little, account executive to account executive. But they should, we hope, also be getting the word out.
Perfect. Any other questions? All right. Well, Tom, really very much appreciate your time and all the work that your team has put into this incredible program. We're all very excited about it. We hope that it is a great success, and that we really to sort of channel this in the kind of into the kind of properties that we all desire.
Yes.
With that, love to have you. Oh, go ahead. And
please share feedback as you see things that are, not quite as, if we didn't think of something and there's some barrier, please share it so that we can figure out whether it's something we can address. Wonderful. Thank you. And feel free to send those comments directly to, I think it's HUD or GRRP at HUD.gov. Correct, Tom? Yes. Or you can send them through us, either way. Yep. Again, you're welcome to stick around. Thank you so much, Tom. We're going to pivot over to the solar bonus tax credit, and also a little bit of a different tack. And with that, I'll turn to Todd.
Thanks, Danielle.
Thanks so much.
So we wanted to provide some updated information to you all about the low-income communities bonus tax credit, because just earlier this month, Treasury has put out some additional guidance that further explains how this program is going to operate. And from NHT's perspective, we see some challenges in that guidance, and want to that might really impede tax credit properties from participating. So wanted to elevate some of those issues that we see to you all and invite feedback from you all on sort of how we can improve the guidance to make sure that this program is really beneficial to affordable multifamily housing owners. Just to provide sort of an overview and a reminder about how this program is to operate. So basically, the IRA included the ability to increase the ITC tax credit rate. So there's a 30% base ITC tax credit rate in the IRA. And then in addition to that, certain projects can receive a percentage point increase in that tax credit value. So in particular, for a qualifying low-income building, multifamily building, the solar facility can owner can receive a 20 percentage point increase in that tax credit, so that the tax credit will cover 50% of the cost of the facility. So it's
Hey,
so it's a really good opportunity to increase the likelihood of being able to finance some solar deployment in some of the affordable housing properties. I will mention that there are specific covered housing programs that are eligible for this tax credit, and I've included a list here. It's a pretty extensive list. It's pretty much just about any sort of rent restricted, subsidized federal housing program really qualifies. One thing I want to make clear, and I think this has implications in terms of underwriting the tax credit, is that this is not an as of right tax credit. Most tax credits, are as of right. If you meet certain criteria, then you receive the tax credit. There is a limited pool of tax credit capacity that's available through this bonus tax credit program. It's 1.8 gigawatts total. And so there will be competition for this tax credit. It's not, if the affordable multifamily housing owner applies and meets under the eligible covered housing programs, there's no guarantee that they will receive this tax credit. So I just wanted to, there's some sort of misconception out there, and I wanted to make sure that folks are aware of that. Next slide. And to further underscore sort of the uncertainty or the sort of pathway to earning a bonus tax credit award, and just sort of underscoring the fact that it's not as of right. This is sort of the process Treasury envisions it in terms of how a facility owner can receive a tax credit. So the first step, obviously, is to meet the eligibility requirements. And like I said, there are the covered housing programs are pretty. The list of covered housing programs is pretty extensive. So that's that will be easy, essentially, right? That's not a hard lift to demonstrate that your building is covered by one of those programs. And then in terms of the application requirements, what Treasury is requiring applicants to do is demonstrate that at least 50% of the financial value of the net energy savings from the solar facility will be equitably passed on to building occupants. We really don't have that much clarity in terms of how that's going to happen, what that process is, or what are the means by which building owners can demonstrate that they are providing that net energy savings to residents. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And then even if the building owner submits those requirements and meets the application requirements, we're expecting that there's going to be more competition than available tax credit capacity. And so Treasury is envisioning a selection process that will prioritize certain applicants based on specific characteristics, in particular, projects that are in certain geographic areas, persistent poverty counties, or disadvantaged areas that are designated by the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool. And Treasury is also going to be using an ownership criteria to prioritize projects, including among other ownership sort of entities, prioritizing facilities owned by a tax-exempt entity. Next slide. So like I said, the Treasury is envisioning requiring that in sub-metered buildings, tenants must receive the financial value associated with utility bill savings as a form of a credit on their utility bill. So that is ideal. That's something that I think we all want to see. The challenge is that not every state has policies in place that really support, efficiently and cost effectively doing that. So there are about 20 states that you see here with metering policies that really support sharing solar savings as a credit on resident utility bills. Our concern is that if Treasury primarily, requires this particular approach, that applicants in states where those policies don't already exist might be disadvantaged from participating in the program. Next slide. And so what NHT is looking at is proposing to Treasury and IRS that they allow building owners to pass on the financial benefits to residents by other means. And we've identified here sort of a menu of potential options that Treasury can offer. Essentially, providing the flexibility, the opportunity for building owners to use the financial value of the energy savings to invest in improving the property and providing resident services, providing rent relief, and other sort of amenities and advantages, in addition to the option of providing the financial energy savings as a credit on the tenant's utility bill. But just for those areas where it's just not legally possible or administratively it's not easy, we want to be sure that there's flexibility to provide other means of passing on that financial value to tenants. Next slide. And there are a few other sort of challenges that we see in the guidance that I just wanted to lift up. I mentioned that HUD is going to be, or sorry, Treasury is going to be looking at certain types of ownership characteristics as they prioritize facilities for a tax credit award. And one is a qualified tax exempt entity. As it stands, it doesn't look like the definition here will ensure that nonprofit managing member or general partner will qualify under that prioritization. And so we're concerned that, because tax credit partnerships are, mostly for-profit entities, that this might disadvantage tax credit properties from competing fairly for the tax credit capacity. So we are proposing to Treasury that they add language ensuring that, a nonprofit sponsor of a tax credit property, that would qualify them as meeting this qualified tax exempt entity status. Treasury is proposing to require that facility owners, building owners, get a signed benefit sharing agreement with the tenants. Again, I think that would be ideal. However, we are concerned that there are going to be challenges to that. We don't know if Treasury is expecting that every tenant, for example, would be required to sign that benefit sharing agreement as part of the application requirements. So we are proposing to Treasury that they require owners to provide tenants, a benefits sharing plan with plenty of opportunity for tenants to provide feedback. But we just don't think it's practical to require every tenant to sign an agreement in order for an applicant to move forward with submitting a request for the tax credit bonus. And then finally, like I mentioned, Treasury is also prioritizing applicants in certain geographic locations, specifically persistent poverty counties and the climate and economic justice screening disadvantaged areas. We think that it makes sense to add qualified census tracts to the options of demonstrating that geographic priority. QCTs are obviously well known in the affordable housing community, and think that it would be great to just sort of add to the current list of options to add qualified census tracts. So that is sort of an overview of the guidance. I know it's kind of a lot of information. I guess I would be curious, and I know we're running short on time, if anyone on the call, if you're seeing developers come to you, with a plan to apply for the tax credit bonus and are seeking to underwrite to that, is that something that you all are coming across? And is there any additional information that would be helpful in sort of understanding the program process as Treasury currently proposes it? Like I said, NHT is providing comments on the proposed rulemaking, and happy to work with you all if there are others that would like to submit comments as well. And certainly if folks, want to weigh in offline, please feel free to reach out and contact me, and happy to share more information and hear your perspective. Next slide. So with that, I just wanted to preview the upcoming bootcamp sessions. It's going to be a busy July and August. We're expecting a lot of additional information to come out on the IRA programs. Our next session is scheduled for July 19th from 2 to 3:30, and we intend to focus there on the home energy rebate programs. There's 2 rebate programs in the IRA, one for energy efficiency retrofits and one for high efficiency electric appliances. We're expecting DOE to release their final guidance for how states should design those programs in early July. And so we're hoping by the 19th to be able to kind of provide a thorough overview of that DOE final guidance and talk about what we see as one of the priorities in terms of making sure that affordable housing can access those rebates, which is just ensuring that state energy offices have the information they need and are motivated to kind of streamline the process to ensure that projects in the HFA pipeline portfolio can access those rebates easily. On August 2nd, we will also meet to talk about the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. We're expecting EPA to come out with their final guidance for that $27 billion program. Again, this is the biggest source of funding in the IRA. And so it's a pretty important resource. And we will talk then about pathways for HFAs to support developers in accessing that financing. And then August 23rd, we're expecting, by then for the tax credit, additional guidance on the tax credits to be finalized. And so we'll provide an overview of those tax credits that are really most relevant to affordable housing, and talk about the underwriting impacts. And so, yeah, so stay tuned. Obviously, lots happening, and in between these sessions, like Danielle mentioned, we will be offering the opportunity to convene you all to really share with each other what you're seeing in your states and how you all are approaching incorporating these incentives into your projects. So Danielle, anything else to summarize before we?
The only thing I was going to offer is just a response to Catherine's note here. And there's a quick question for you, Todd, about will the home energy rebates be available for improvements in 2023? I think so, but I'm not sure if you know the answer off the top of your head.
So they'll only be available for improvements that are taking place after the state energy office has an approved program plan. So
okay, so
I think it's probably going to be more like 2024. I don't know if states are going to be able to get their programs up and running and approved by DOE in 2023.
Okay. Great. And then to your point, Catherine, about communicating all this information, we hear that. I think that's part of what Madeline was responding to earlier too, which is knowing that we can perhaps be of service to you in packaging some of this material. Our newsletters attempt to do that, but sounds like continuing focus on helping to distill down some of this content. To that end, if you all come across newsletters that you think are really effective by partners in your state, please send them our way so we can sort of seek to replicate that, learn from that, share that with others. We know there's great examples out there, and let's not reinvent the wheel if we don't have to, and be efficient with everyone's time. So if you come across something that you think is great that your HFA peers might also benefit from, feel free to send it through us, and we'll get the word out. But thank you, everyone. Session, lots to cover. There always is. For future sessions, we always book these for 90 minutes, thinking we might cut it a little short. We know people sometimes have to drop at the hour, so if you do, that's fine. These are all available after the fact recording as well. So once again, thank you so much, and we see you back here on the line.